and into YouTube. Okay, good morning, everyone. Oh, it says I'm muted, but I'm not muted. Everyone can hear me? I see nodding of heads. Thank you very much. I'd like to officially call this meeting to order. Do I hear an echo? Maybe Mr. Hammond's computer. I'm not mistaken. To call this meeting to order at 9:04 a.m. It's an electronic meeting being held in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act due to our COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to confirm that all members of the council are present, as well as our senior staff from the Township of Municipal Lakes. I also want to acknowledge today that we're on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples have cared for this territory for the benefit of future generations and their stewardship throughout the ages. I also, as this is a special day and a day that's been marked in history, that being 9/11, 19 years ago in New York, need to realize that and respect those people who lost their lives in that tragedy, and certainly acknowledge that I'll just say at times we need more love in this world than oftentimes hate, and the spirit of working together, which I think is also good discussion springboard, if you will, for today's meeting as we work together to find solutions going forward. So I definitely acknowledge the lives lost through 9/11. Public input for today's agenda was planning@muskokalakes.ca, and we did see a few emails, I know. I think council saw a written submission again last night asking to withdraw their name. Motions, as we know these days, becoming second place, that they're pre-populated, and we'll vote by our hands in the air. We have no supplementary agenda today. Do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Everyone is shaking their head. That's awesome. Thank you. We have some invited delegations, and I think we can, Kelly, let them into the room as best we can. They're coming in. We have Paula Bustard from who's Vice President of Cleveland House Limited. Also Susan Eplett, Ken Pierce. Frank Potto has removed his delegation, but I'm sure he is listening intently on. And the one thing I will ask for Mr. Pierce, who I see is just logged in, and also Paula and Susan Eplett, when we call upon you, we'll get you to turn your cameras on, but otherwise we'll get you to turn your cameras off, so those people watching the YouTube have an ability to see who council is specifically, and you'll notice that our senior staff also have their cameras off. So I see Ken and Susan. I'll just get you to turn your camera off right now, and then when we ask you to speak and you want to delegate, we'll get you to turn your camera back on. That's okay. There goes Ken. Thank you. And Susan, I think just trying to find the off button. And I think from a speaking order perspective, I've got Paula going to run first, and then we're going to do a little slight alteration. I believe Ken Pierce, and then Susan Eplett is going to go next. Susan, I'll ask, is it okay that you turn off your camera until you're speaking, just so that the public have a better idea of what's going on? There we go. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So without any further ado, I'll just check. Mr. Pink, are you okay, or we can go right into our delegations? I think we can go right into our delegations, and appreciate the work of staff. There was an additional chart that was provided for everyone to sort of outline and explain sort of the planning process and where we're going. And I do realize that 2 weeks ago when we met, or 10 days ago, I guess it was, that for many people it was new and just understanding the process of an official plan amendment. So with that said, I'll also get, I think Councillor Jagowitz, your microphone is on. I'll get you to mute that, thank you. And I will turn the table over to Paula from Cleveland House. Paula, the floor is yours to lead us off today. And I'll remind people, if possible, those people delegating, if we can try and keep our comments to 5 minutes. And I will also say, hopefully, and I know that Mr. Potto said this in his note, he didn't want to repeat what he had done last week. So I think for both Ken and Susan and Paula, the same thing, if we can hopefully not repeat. Council is very well versed. what was said last time, and we'll move forward. So Paula, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I am just going to give a brief presentation today. I'll try to keep it short, but we were asked if we would share our concept plans, and we thought that might be beneficial in terms of helping inform council of what the thought process behind the conceived designs for Cleveland's House would be. And these were presented originally to the steering committee last fall, and then we shared them with the Minett working group early this year. And a version of it has been shared with some community groups, but it's never been publicly kind of unveiled. So that's what I'm going to go through today, not a repeat of our concerns with some of the policy initiatives that have been brought forward. And then I'm happy to answer any questions. I have the host is disabled participant screen sharing, so I can't share my screen right now. Are we able to?
We're going to try and just set that up right now. Hang on one second.
Yep.
And we will get that going forward. And again, this is just, I think, for council's understanding. Numbers in an official plan are just that, numbers, and difficult to sort of see what the vision is. And I think it is important to understand the vision, especially also for the public to understand. They saw one iteration about 2 years ago and are looking for something a little bit more. Councillor Zavitz, you wanted a quick comment before we go forward?
Thank you. Through you. Paula just mentioned community groups. What other community groups would have seen this presentation pre the council?
Well, I wouldn't say the presentation. The presentation itself is just the steering committee and the working group. There's one concept plan that we shared with a couple of members of Friends of Muskoka. Just they had asked to see it, but that was about maybe a week ago or maybe just before the last council meeting, but not the presentation, not the full package at all.
And not what we're about to see today. So
no, not what you're about to see today.
Thank you. Okay, Paula, over to you.
So thank you very much. And I will try to keep this brief. And you know, I hope you'll appreciate the disclaimer. It's a concept plan, but we have not gone into any finite detailed design of the site at all. This was really trying to inform our vision for the property. And I think everything that I've said previously holds true, that this was obviously purchased with the intent to do something, you know, great architecture, great open space, and really revitalize the site with an appropriate amount of density. And we did share the concerns that previous concepts were an overdevelopment of the site. But they are subject to change because we haven't got into kind of detailed design of the site. We are working with Sasaki, which was an urban design firm out of Boston, and they had visited the site last year with us and helped us on some of this reimagining. So just a quick aerial. Obviously, everyone's well familiar with the Cleveland's House and everything that obviously is inside from Lake Rosso to Peninsula Road. Obviously, the proximity and the interface with the JW Marriott has to be considered. And then obviously the Rock golf course just at the top of the screen. There is significant land holdings that we have on the other side of Peninsula Road, but our development concept has focused on the core Cleveland's House property, as we refer to it. One of the first things that we, and again, I will try to keep this brief, but there's a bit of a long history here. We were really looking at the access points, and obviously Judd Haven Road is a main access point, and there was talk of creating another secondary road access off of Peninsula Road that would come into towards the marina. So we are looking at how the access with the circulation. And one of the other things we looked at was the alignment of Judd Haven. One of the things we've explored is whether we want to play with the alignment of Judd Haven to give a bit more room to breathe along the waterfront. I know a lot of the concerns that we've heard from various people is just density and development on the waterfront, but the existing Cleveland's property is quite narrow. Trying to get those uses in there, we thought that there's a potential to realign Judd Haven to give a little bit more room for prosody and open space and connectivity, and to get these uses in an appropriate manner. So that's one thing that we spent some time looking at with our traffic consultant. The overall concept plan is focused on some main components, the hotel being obviously positioned near Judd Haven, just off of Peninsula Road, on the lower boundary of the property now. And then there's a spattering of cottages and cabins. We really want to bring tennis and health and wellness back to this facility. And right near the marina, I think the heart and soul of this development, the concept is a wellness center. And that wellness center would include retail, restaurants, amenity space, community gathering, amphitheaters, public plazas. And we really see as this being kind of the gathering spot. And I know we've talked a lot about boats and docking. We really do think that the existing traffic that's on boat traffic that's on Lake Rosso can come to this point, can dock, can come do shopping, community gathering, use the trail system. This could really be a gathering point, and that's really the nucleus of the development. And then there's obviously what we refer to as the Bayside Cottages, which is just below the JW Marriott. So I'll just go through this in a little bit more detail and happy to answer any questions. But as I just said there, the core components are hotel, cabins, and the wellness center. And the wellness center kind of being the cultural heart and soul of this development. Again, this is just zoomed in, just showing obviously with the existing Cleveland House property with the hotel, the spattering of cabins and cottages. We want to introduce hiking trails, potentially on the other side of Judhaven Road, where there is a significant grade change. We think there's the opportunity potentially for eco cabins that kind of are up at a bit of a higher elevation and embedded within the landscape, and they could be an interesting component. There's the wetlands, which we think could be a wetland park, which would stitch together components of the site and the wellness center and could be a great feature. And then the marina being repositioned and done in an appropriate way to obviously provide the boats, maintenance, and potentially some boat storage that would be off the water. And then there is potential for some hillside suites just on the other side of the road behind the wellness center. This is what we've looked at. Again, one of the main components of this is just mobility, vehicular accessibility, pedestrian accessibility, cycling. One of the main concepts here is creating a very porous, open plan that has a lot of open space, trail systems, and a really easy to access and to circulate, and has a great interface with the adjacent uses, including to the JW Marriott. Let's go keep going. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you now are inspirational images, more to give some ideas. Obviously, this is not etched in stone from a trail system, but certainly one of our aspirations is with the sheer magnitude of land that we own and are adjacent to, we think that there's a great opportunity for a magnitude of trail systems that could be put into place here and even beyond what's being shown on the screen, and different hierarchy of trail systems. So obviously including within the development itself, just a lot of pedestrian focus, providing connectivity to the different uses on site. And then more formal trail systems in the more wilderness that would obviously could be connected to the wellness center. So visitors coming to the site and users who are existing on the site all would have access to that. Obviously, nature is a focus. That's the starting point here, is how do we design something that's complementary and works within the beautiful natural setting that exists today. Obviously, that's going to be a main focus of ours, not just from a pure sustainability point of view, but also just from a design and aesthetics component of how do you embrace kind of the natural features of the site and make the architecture complementary to it. And that's a massive objective of ours. So trail systems, again, different hierarchies of trail systems, some pure natural through woodlands, other ones more formal, boardwalks, walkways, pathways, and that'll be a main component of creating proper connectivity through the site. The wetland itself is an interesting component, and right now there are obviously pedestrian crossings through the wetland that can be enhanced to be a major feature, not just from a connection point of view, but it's just a very beautiful setting, and especially with the wellness center, it could be a main component. So we're looking at best practices of different types of designs and features that could be connected through the wetland. And then the lakeshore itself, I mean, with the water frontage, what is that relationship between development and open space to the actual lake? And specifically around the wellness center and some of the developments, you know, what is that interface? What does the actual shoreline look like? So there's lots of ideas throughout the world, and we'll be obviously investigating that and working with all approval agencies on what is the best and highest use for those sites. And then beach areas and just open space, obviously being a main component of what we're focusing on as well. So the wellness center, as I said, is really, I would say, the epicenter of this development and really what we're focused on. And I don't think that the building shape and look and feel that you're seeing here is certainly not etched in stone. We're going to be working with great architects and coming up with a phenomenal design, but we really see this as being the cultural heart and soul of what we're proposing here. Having athletics, having retail, having community space, potentially museum space, really something that could be a gathering spot for the community, including open space out front that could have programming, amphitheaters, and just really be something that's a feature for visitors to Cleveland's House, but also to the residents of Muskoka. And there's lots of examples around the world of great ways that you can obviously blend architecture and landscape into the waterfront. So just some images to show you. The public plaza is something that we feel strongly will be an important component, and having that gathering space and having the flexibility to have programming and event space. And then at the heart of this, we really see health and wellness. We really see the development focusing around a health and wellness focus with the tennis facilities, with the wellness center, and with the overall programming that we want to do on site. So there's a lot of great developments that have been done that focus on health and wellness. And from an architecture point of view, the cabins and cottages, we really want to do something spectacular. And this is just one focus area of where the cabins would be, but we see them being different sizes, some, you know, quite small, but we see obviously them all linked with a green spine, having the pedestrian focus, having a trail system, having open space, and making sure that everything is embedded in nature as a first principle. And the cabins, we really want to have fun with an architecture point of view. You know, great materiality, great placement, so that they're interesting, they're comfortable, and that they really blend into the landscape in a meaningful way. So these are some just kind of precedent images of different things that have been done around the world. The hotel itself, you know, more of a boutique style hotel. We think this, you know, what's being shown on here is around a 4-story, really having the pure hotel with restaurants, pavilions, some hotel cottages around obviously a pier and event space. And then again, architecturally speaking, you know, this is something that we haven't spent too much time on yet, but there's great opportunity to do great architecture here that really blends with the landscape. And then the last main component is the other side of the bay, which we're referring to as the bayside cottages. And these are various lots that kind of sit below the great elevation change with JW Marriott. So we think this is a good opportunity to do some probably larger cottages that could be in the rental pool that are a little bit more isolated, but still will be connected through pedestrian linkages to the rest of the development. And there's some significant grade changes in there that provides opportunities and some limitations. But obviously, we're gonna have to test fit what works best there. So overall, that is the general design vision for the site. Without repeating myself previously, we really want to get into the details. We really want to start exploring, you know, architecture and craftsmanship and open space and landscaping. And once we get through kind of these policy hurdles, that'll be our focus, and then working on phasing to implement this vision. And we are just asked also, I'll send this presentation through. Again, this was in our deputation last week, so I won't repeat it, but just the concessions that we've spoken about, number of units and ratios and GFA caps that are not existing in existing policy right now. And we remain committed to these. We do feel that obviously the draft that's before you now has taken this a bit too far, and we're not supportive of all components of it, but I won't repeat my comments from last week. And then lastly, we were asked obviously to look into the servicing, and we will be submitting a formal memo after council today. We've done a jurisdictional review of policies in various municipalities and districts, more rural nature. And we found various policies allow for private servicing. I'm not saying all of them will be 100% applicable, but we will submit a formal memo that specifies it and gives you a little bit more of the research behind that. 2 specific examples of the Township of Meaford and Dufferin County, both of which have abilities for private servicing, and they require various agreements. Meaford in particular calls it a responsibility agreement that sets the parameters for how that will be enforced. But we and our consultants would be happy to submit that memo and have a follow-up meeting with town and district staff and to discuss it in more detail. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we'll go back to non-screen sharing, and we'll go back to the group view if we can.
Absolutely.
There we go. Everyone's back. Councillor Jagowitz has a question. Frank?
Sorry, I'm struggling here. I've lost my, can you hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Okay, I just lost my screen. Paula, I wonder if it was possible to indicate by maybe putting the concept plan back up, but if not, if you could explain it, You're requesting a certain percentage of residential in the RCs, or resort zones. I think around 35% or maybe larger. Could you indicate on that plan where you think that residential would be? You didn't mention that in your presentation.
Paula,
So, yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, okay. We have not, as I said, nothing on this plan is absolutely etched in stone. There's two areas that we've shown as potential residential, which are the hillside suites up here. And we also had the notion of down here on this corner here, some suites as well. But that is not in any way, shape or form etched in stone. We really are trying to design the site with flexibility so that we can look at market conditions at the time. So regardless of whether it's commercial or residential, our vision here is to design the site holistically and that everything blends and works together, nothing to be done in silos, nothing to be done independent. But I think, and Mitch himself, when he presented to the steering committee last fall, was quite open in saying the one logical location, I keep hitting my computer, is just north of the marina here, is a logical place if residential was to be incorporated. But again, that is not a formal position that we've taken, and that's something that we would work with staff and with everyone on as we advance their designs.
Okay.
So
Thank
may
you.
I have a quick supplementary?
Yep.
So just to summarize what I hear you saying, because I did sit in on Mitch's presentation to the steering committee, and what I hear you saying is that you don't envision any residential in the hotel cabin area, but possibly across under the Marriott or behind Wallace Bay. Is that what I heard you said? But also you indicated you that's not instant concrete.
That is correct. I mean, the plan that we're showing you is conceptual at this point, and that may change, but based on what I've shown you today, those would be the locations that we think, if residential is to be incorporated, makes the most sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any other questions? I'm just going to ask one. Oh, sorry, Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. That was an excellent presentation, Paula. It really helps. If there is any residential on the waterfront is it going to be 200-foot frontage, just like everybody else that has a residential cottage?
It would not
or will it be back from the water?
The sites that we showed you were back from the water, but from a policy perspective, we have been preserving the right. What has been requested and negotiated to date was the right to do residential within the waterfront, so it hasn't specified a location and distance. And no, the 200-foot would not be applicable in this zone because it is a higher density format than what in other zones along the lake. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any comments? I guess I'm going to just turn to Director of Environmental Services and Planning, Mr. Pink, just to understand a little bit to sort of Frank's question or whatever. So help me understand again. So we're more of a high level now. When we get to a local zoning bylaw, we can be a little bit more restrictive in saying, no, we want some residential back here and definitely a no-go zone there. But this is some very high level stuff. And then again, we can become more and more restrictive as we move our way through this development process. David?
That is correct. Right now, the official plan policies, if you look at the schedules that were circulated with the agenda on August 31st, the 25% residential component that's proposed at this stage would largely be along that shoreline from Cleveland's House, Wallace Marine, and around to the JW Marriott. It doesn't stipulate precisely where that breakdown can occur. That could be done at the zoning stage or more clarity as we work through this process if that's desired and agreed upon.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other comments or questions? Paula, thank you. And I will say again, I think on behalf of Councillor Bridgman and Edwards and myself, as we worked through the last sort of 6 months on and off meetings, I do appreciate the fact of where you have come. You know, we're obviously not there yet, but I think at this point, it's also great to get some additional public input, and then within the next couple of months, council can really chime in and say, this is what we really want in this OP. So it's just, as David's chart in our agenda package sort of illustrated, I think getting that input and more input and more input versus ourselves just talking to ourselves. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, I'll get you to turn off your camera, and then I think we're going to go to Mr. Pierce. Ken, over to you. Ken, okay, to unmute your microphone. We can't hear you. Thank you.
Okay, am I on?
You're good. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to speak. Ken Pierce again. I will be speaking to 3 matters this morning. The first is as of right entitlements. The second is municipal services versus private communal services. And the third is where do we go from here? As of right entitlements or current entitlements as they're being described, you've been told that Cleveland's House has as of right entitlements to over 3,800 units. That's in the IBI letter. I'm sure you will be hearing that if they went to LPAT, that this is what they are entitled to. I think this is incorrect. I think it may have been true for the previous owners, for Fowler and Freed, but it is not true now. A purchaser who purchases when an interim control bylaw is in place to pause development while the district and the township study what is appropriate for Minett, including serious concerns about density, is, in my view, on notice that density entitlements are not cast in stone and may be reduced, and that they may be reduced significantly. To say that proposing a reduction in density in such circumstances is a significant concession, I suggest, must be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. Municipal services versus private communal services, I think this is a key issue, and as you heard Paula say, you're going to get hopefully a memorandum on that of where other municipalities, and there's probably a handful of them around Ontario that have done this, but the IBI letter indicates that Cleveland's House is prepared to agree to a 65-35 ratio as opposed to the current 50-50 ratio of commercial to residential in the Resort Commercial 1 and Resort Commercial 2 zones. What it fails to mention, though, and council needs to be aware of this regarding this entitlements, are 3 little words: on municipal services. This is only permitted on municipal services. There is 0 entitlement to build any residential in a commercial zone on private communal services in the current district and township OPs. If you or in the district were to agree to this, this would be a huge concession on your parts. You may decide to do it. That's going to be up to you. In fact, there is no entitlement to build residential in the residential zones except on municipal services per the official plans as well. Having looked into the matter further, even resort commercial accommodation units are required to be on municipal services. I now understand, having checked this more closely, that the exception to this in the Minett's policy was a very limited exception, not a general one, and it relates to the Marriott because I understand the Marriott hotel was already under construction at that time. So there is a reason for this. If the septic fails and the resort shuts down, the guests go home, no problem. And I suggest even the resort commercial accommodation unit owners, they're much like seasonal cottagers. They would return to their primary residences. But the residential owners, whether pure residential or this new category of resort-related residential, are home already. They have nowhere to go. And I mentioned this in my earlier letter that this could be a huge problem. In the interest of full disclosure, while the district and the township official plans currently require municipal services, and as the Travis opinion points out, and given the scale of the development we're proposing here, the May 2020 provincial policy statement states that municipal servicing is preferred, but the new OPS, I acknowledge, does open the door a little bit to private communal services where municipal services are not available, planned, or feasible, and provided that specified conditions are met. Now, interestingly enough, I looked through the PPS, I couldn't find what is meant by these specified conditions. It does refer in one place to, and the Travis report opinion did say this, including strict monitoring and responsibility agreements, and you heard Paula say this as well, and arguably other matters, such as some of the matters I set out in my earlier letter. So the question is, if you were to do this, what conditions? And you need to be very, very careful with this. The last area is where do we go from here? I think it's very clear from the LPAT decisions, Villas, Touchstone, Legacy, even the recent Bala Bay Inn, you need to have definitions, you need to have precise wording, you need to have mandatory language, shall and will, and not may. And let me give an example, and this isn't the wording now, but if you put new wording in place for on-site staff accommodation, shall be considered. Well, the word shall is helpful, but it's the word considered that would be a problem. And a developer could rightfully say, I considered it, I thought about it. No, I'm not going to build them on site for my resort. I'm going to put them elsewhere, like Bala Bay Inn. And LPAT would say, okay. And the township would say, oh, well. So you've got to be very specific. I'll give an actual real world example. In 6.2.3E of the draft Minett OPA, it says no resort residential until an appropriate amount of resort commercial accommodation units and resort related amenities are built. And it's the words appropriate amount. Like, what does that mean? Who decides what it means? I mean, if you want to go to LPAT and have them decide what appropriate amount means, that's up to you. But I think what you need to think about doing is if it's 75-25 or 65-35 for the units or whatever percentage is agreed, if you're building it, you need to build it in that ratio. So if you build 10 residential units on the waterfront, you need to build 30 resort commercial accommodation units. Similarly, for the non-accommodation GFA, you know, if there's a specified percentage or square footage of GFA that's non-accommodation, that should be being built either before or during the time that residential units are built. Otherwise, you may end up with all the residential and no resort or no hotel or no pool or no restaurant or whatever. I would add that, as the mayor has pointed out, all the stakeholders are a little bit grumpy about the draft Minett OPA. We all have some concerns, some issues, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would be supportive of sending it out for public consultation as is, and not spend a whole lot of time tweaking it. I think the public consultation process, all the stakeholders will have ample opportunity to further comment. I think you need to think about what you're going to tell the district on your views on municipal services versus private communal services, and any concerns that you may have and what you'd want to see. Because if the septic fails and it's residential, they're going to be calling you, and you need to be prepared for that. I mean, we've seen this with the Marriott. I think council will need to make some difficult decisions in the months to come, and I think the mayor just alluded to that. But I am confident that this council has the ability to deal with this matter. Thank you very much. Happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Pierce. Council, any questions? Ken, at this time? I think we're good. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And our final delegate of this morning, Susan. Ms. Applet, are you around? Okay, out there.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for allowing this opportunity to speak. A week ago, you received a joint letter from the Muskoka Lakes Association and the Friends of Muskoka with our initial comments on the draft Minett OPA. And then the MLA's president, Deborah Martin Downs, spoke to you last week and highlighted our key points, which there's no need to take your time repeating. We hope during the past week, you've been able to achieve a better understanding of what the draft OPA is proposing and consider the 5 biggest issues before you, namely whether to allow residential units, if so, how many in each area and with what restrictions, the density in each of the areas, the type of servicing, the number of docks, and the conditions to ensure commercial use of the resort commercial units. On the issue of servicing, Mr. Pierce has just explained that Mr. Goldhar is asking for permission to build residential units on private communal services, whereas the district and township official plans require municipal services in order for there to be any residential at a commercial resort. The MLA and Friends have made our position clear that we strongly oppose residential subdivisions at waterfront commercial resort properties because of the long established policy that a residential building requires a minimum of 200 feet of shoreline. Commercial lots are allowed to have greater building density because they are supposed to provide other benefits, including accommodation for tourists and employment. However, there are special circumstances in Minett. To begin with, Minett has given was given very large building permissions on municipal services over 10 years ago, which need to be reduced based on the results of the steering committee's studies. Plus, Minett has a special designation under the OP as a resort village and is a uniquely large piece of waterfront property. So if council decides to allow a limited number of residential units as part of reducing these old excessive permissions, we believe it will not set a precedent for other resorts if council makes it clear that residential is discouraged at a waterfront commercial resort and should only be allowed for properties that meet the special performance standards that exist at Minett. This means that residential would only be considered at another commercial resort if it has a long-standing history in the township and is designated as a resort hamlet, or whatever other term council creates to designate Minett. Second, it has over 1,500 feet of waterfront and over 50 acres of land. Third, it has significant resort amenities such as restaurants, retail shops, recreation centers, a spa, and a minimum percentage of its gross floor area is non-accommodation space. And finally, its commercial accommodation units have conditions to ensure they remain commercial, including being in a rental pool a majority of the year, plus a majority of July and August. So these special performance standards should be written clearly into the official plan, so their meaning is indisputably clear to developers. The township and the community's very unfortunate loss in the Paula Bay Inn LPAT decision shows that developers are favored when the rules are ambiguous and open to interpretation. It's time to eliminate the maze, the where possibles from our OP language and put back the musts and the shalls. And as Mr. Pierce mentioned, there are other words too we have to avoid. Where appropriate, shall be considered. The Paula Bay Inn loss also demonstrates that whatever council and the community wants must be explicitly spelled out in the official plan, since no matter how much a development will harm the character of a community, if the rules aren't clear or if there's any room for interpretation, it will likely be allowed by LPAT. You've now heard from the steering committee, the landowners, the MLA, and Friends of Muskoka. I expect you each have your own thoughts about what you'd like to see in Minett, but until you hear from the public at large, you don't have all perspectives. We urge you to now send the draft OPA to the public and hear their comments. That is the missing piece you need in order to make an informed decision on what is appropriate for Minett. Those are my comments, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Great, thank you for that, Susan. Council, any questions for Susan at this time? Okay, Susan, thank you. Appreciate your comments. And I also, it's interesting that through everybody, including Mr. Pato, who again withdrew his recommendation, that they are suggesting that we start to seek more public input. So at this point, I think I'll go to Mr. Pink just to outline where we are, where our next steps would be. And we have an official report in our package, but also had a chart, I think, that kind of explains. So David.
Thank you, and good morning, Council. Again, I think we've heard a lot from the public, a number of delegations this morning and last week. Certainly, there was a lot of material, breadth of material for Council to digest on relatively short notice at the last Council meeting. We hope over the last 2 weeks we had time to absorb those. It appeared to staff as though there were a number of questions on process and the next steps at our last meeting. So put together a brief report with a visual that just puts a more visual depiction of the next steps in the process. And I really hope that was helpful for Council to understand that we are really at the beginning stages of a lengthy process, albeit it's already been 2.5 years in. There's still a number of steps to go to receive public input and then to analyze and review that public input and potentially make changes to the draft that you have before you today before finally considering adoption. So I hope that visual was helpful. Again, happy to try to answer any questions Council may have on the draft OPA, the process we've had to date with the steering committee and the working group, or on the steps going forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, any questions of Mr. Pink at this point? Not seeing any hands up, so I think, oh, is that Councillor Edwards, then Councillor Hayes? Thank you. Then Jagwitz.
Thanks, and Mr. Pink. Have you had any discussion with the district on private servicing?
David?
I would say on a high level basis, certainly Summer Valentine and I have talked about the issue at length. It obviously is a very significant issue and component of those policies, and we've heard that a number of times. I think what has to occur is more direct involvement with the Public Works and Engineering Department at the district. And I know Summer is working with them, and the proponent, I believe, is trying to schedule meetings with them to work through that issue. So apologize, no specifics. We certainly discussed it at a high level from a planning perspective, but we really need to get more in-depth discussions with the principal stakeholder and the engineers at the district Public Works and Engineering Department.
Thank you. And a supplemental. On that diagram with the Bayside cottages there on the far side, what is the zoning on that now? Because they used to be private residential at one time. Is that correct?
If you're referring to, through the, your worship, if you're referring to the lands across from Cleveland's House on the east side of Moss Bay, yes, they used to be, I believe, community residentially zoned or community waterfront zoning. They were privately held. I believe Campbell Enterprises acquired those some time ago, and I believe they're currently in a hold zone, but zoned commercial.
They are zoned commercial now because, okay, when did that zoning get changed?
I will, let me confirm that. I'll bring up our mapping and just confirm to be 100% certain, but I'm fairly certain those are zoned commercial at the current time and subject to a hold. But if you can
thank you.
bear with me, I can confirm that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think for that, we'll let David come back in. I just want to provide one comment to Councillor Everett's perspective. And as Chair of Engineering and Public Works at the district, based on our last meeting, I have had a conversation incidentally with Commissioner Yon at the district. We talked about district oversight, district running, in his simple words, to move forward. And I'll talk also about the current Marriott system that goes on and anything forward. The district would appreciate nothing more than being hired to manage and run any of these systems, which might get us to a finish line and get us to the public comments. So they've been in favor. There'd obviously be deals and logistics to work out along the way, but whatever system is built, as opposed to one massive one, maybe it's 4 small systems to manage an entire development. But again, if it's all managed by the district without cost to the district, then I think we might have another opportunity to protect the environment going forward. So I'll just leave it at that. There's nothing official. Obviously, would have to be a discussion, and servicing is going to be a key discussion, but a discussion between the developer and the district. But I will say also, I'm going to be pushing as chair of that committee that our district also start to entertain and discuss with the Marriott an oversight to manage that plant in particular to a different standard. So I'll leave it at that. I saw Councillor Hayes first, then Councillor Jaguars, then Councillor Bridgman.
Okay. Through you to Mr. Pink. We've talked a lot in the report about the character of Minett, the historical character, the natural character, the commercial and the recreational character. But at no point did I see a definition of what character it was. Should we not be painting a picture of the type of buildings, the quality of water, the general usage and the services, so that if this does go to LPAT, we have a very clear picture of what we're trying to preserve, rather than saying we're trying to preserve the character and have no attributes or definition of it. Thank you.
David.
Thank you. Section 4.2 of the draft OPA does refer to character, certainly an important component in a planning exercise. I guess admittedly, it does touch on the existing character, although certainly I think the comments are taken, we'll take those into consideration. They're somewhat brief. They certainly do touch on more extensively what the future character of Minett should look like with respect to architecture, protecting the environment, and a well-vegetated shoreline. But certainly through this process, staff can, and the consulting team can look at expanding the policies with respect to existing character. I can go back to Councillor Edwards' earlier question. I think what the conceptual plans categorize as the Bayside cottages are currently zoned community commercial C1CA and subject to a hold. I cannot recall off the top of my head, but I believe those were rezoned to that community commercial zoning roughly around the time the JW Marriott was initially being developed, as those lands were acquired by Ken Fowler Enterprises. More recently, through zoning bylaw 2014-14, the hold was placed on those lands given the policies in effect.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards, I'm going to circle back to you in a moment if you wanted a supplemental. But Councillor Hayes, did you have any further comments?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will say, just to comment on your character to avoid an LPAT, if the character definition isn't already in our current official plan, potentially creating a new character definition in the OPA might be the one that's subject to an LPAT decision, and they're going to go back to what was, not what we want to have happen. So I think we have to be careful as we work our way forward here. Councillor Jaguas, and then Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to staff, it's to the director actually, but before I ask it, I support the concept of moving this forward for public comment. I think that's the right thing to do. But before we do that, I do have a question on one of the sections that I think should be clarified. And that section, David, I'm asking this of you, this is section 4.6, servicing. My reading of that section is that private communal services are okay if municipal services are either not required or not available. So it seems to be that almost anything is allowed there. So when you send this to the district, or when you have your public meetings, how are you going to explain what the OPA is recommending there? Are you saying it's just up in the air, or are you recommending something? Because if you go back down to the resort and the village core areas, there's a provision for residential, and then this servicing area seems to say that could take place on any of those types of services. I just wonder if you could clarify that.
David?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, I would say at the onset, this is, I think I would categorize it as certainly a significant departure from existing district policy or township policy. As we know, the current plan does require municipal services and very limited development to occur prior to those municipal services coming in place. The existing policies did allow the JW Marriott to develop as a first phase, and they recognized that would occur on private services, but limited development would occur after that until municipal services were established. The proponent, and I would also say the steering committee, did recommend that private communal services be the route to take as opposed to municipal services. The current draft OPA is very open. It is flexible. It would allow any of those services. It is a bit of a different hierarchy than the PPS. It was intentionally, as per the direction of the steering committee, put that private communal services first, but would it also allow municipal servicing if it became feasible and appropriate. So it is a flexible, open policy that would allow any of those, including individual subjects services as well.
Supplementary?
Certainly, go ahead.
Yes, but that's for this draft, I assume. I assume that as a result of the public meetings and back when it comes back to us, that won't be left that way. That'll be, there will be a definite decision made, will there not? So in other words, that's not the way this is going to get passed, I assume.
David?
Certainly. Again, we're certainly at the very early stages. There will be a lot of public and stakeholder feedback, and it's quite likely that those policies will change, and council may determine to fall on one of those and prefer not to leave it as flexible and open as it is. It'll be interesting to see what comments from the district as well, around the district council chamber, what their thinking is on that policy. So certainly nothing I think is set in stone at this stage. Certainly want to make that clear.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, this dovetails nicely to what Councillor Jaglowitz was just talking about. I think we need to get this out to the public. At this point, this isn't a recommendation from council. This is from our consultant with what the consultant considers proper planning to come up with this based on what the consultant was involved in our working group. So I think it's very appropriate to lead those three options in, and let's hear from the public. So that's part one. And part two, and I have discussed this with Mr. Pink this morning and Mr. Hammond, what I would like to see from a process standpoint is that once we get the public input coming back, that we have maybe 2 or 3 2-hour planning meetings in November on specific topics, so that is when we start to really discuss, and to your point, Councillor Jaglowitz, see where council wants to go with these various topics, density and docking and servicing. So that I just wanted to throw that out to you. That's my thought process as the chair of planning, that we get down to work in November and we'll have all of the input that we need at that point. And probably 2-hour meetings, because after that, as we all know, it gets tougher and tougher to make decisions. Thanks, Mayor Hardy.
Thank you for that. And I agree 100%. Let's get more public input and then let's do some of the heavy lifting ourselves. Councillor Edwards, you wanted to circle back on the waterfront zoning in front of the Marriott?
What I wanted to know, and at the beach area that they're showing on there, is that public beach? Because we're putting all these staff housing and that at the back. How do they get to use the waterfront? I believe there's an access to the water, but is there going to be a parkland dedication, or just how is that being handled, Mr. Pink?
David, is that to you or is that actually to Paul? I think it's a private beach right now. So I'm not sure, David, if you want to handle that.
Sure. Currently, it is privately owned lands. I think, as Worship noted, it might be more of a question for Ms. Bustard if she wishes to chime in. Certainly, that could become part of later negotiations with respect to the cash in lieu or the parkland dedication process. But I think the conceptual plan envisions that to continue as a private beach. But I would look to Paula to clarify.
Yeah, the concept plans right now, it is a private beach, but obviously open space and connectivity and prosody through the site is an important factor. So I think that would be an issue through the detailed zoning and site plan phase to discuss.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on council want to chime in at this point? Or we do have a resolution to move this forward and get some additional public information, and also to get public information from the district on this concept. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I have a resolution moved by Councillor Bridgman, seconded by Councillor Edwards. Whereas Township Muskoka Lakes Council appointed a Minett working group with the mandate to collaborate and work together in an effort to reach consensus in refining the policy directions as provided by the Minett Joint Policy Review Steering Committee, including consideration of completed supporting studies commissioned by the MJPRSC, I love acronyms. And whereas the district official plan amendments have been prepared by a third-party consultant based on multiple perspectives and discussions of the Minett working group, and whereas Meridian planning consultants have been jointly retained by the Township of Muskoka Lakes and the District of Muskoka to lead the formal planning process for the official plan amendments. Now therefore be it resolved that draft official plan amendment XX report Resort Village Minett be circulated for public and other stakeholder comments, and further that a concurrent open house and statutory public meetings be scheduled within the District of Muskoka, and further that the term of the Minett working group be concluded with appreciation, and further that the draft official plan amendment XX directions are conditional upon endorsement of the draft District of Muskoka official plan by the District Community and Planning Services, or CAPS committee. Any further comments on that? I will call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, and I do want to say thank you to, first of all, the Minett Steering Committee that have spent the past 2 years trying to give us additional guiding direction. I want to thank our consultant to get us to this point, those people who were involved with the Minett working group, so to speak, on this particular file for the last 6 months. The work isn't done by any means, but it's certainly a great starting point. And look forward to, as I think everyone on this call has said, more and more public input, where then the 10 of us get the ability to chime in and say what we would like to see, if you will, in Minett. So with that, I have another resolution moved by Councillor Hayes, second by Councillor Jagowitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2020-80 to confirm the proceedings of special council meeting be read a first, second, and third time. Finally passed. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I have one final resolution. Look at that. Moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 9:58 a.m. All those in favor? Made it in under an hour. Great. Council, have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully you can get out and enjoy a little bit of sunshine. I think it's going to be nice today and tomorrow. And then we're back at regular council meetings as the week progresses. So thank you all. And again, thank you to staff for guiding us through this today. Thank you. Have a great day.